Father, we thank you again for each one that is here tonight and ask for your hand to be upon us, Father. Help us to understand these principles as we consider these faith systems that are just so foreign to us and so far removed from the truth of who you are. Lord, just give us understanding and help us to appreciate the needs of people who were born and raised under these belief systems and the challenges that they face in crossing over into knowing who you are. So, Father, we just thank you again and give you this time. In Jesus' name, amen. So, tonight we're going to be talking about Eastern religions. We're going to predominantly be talking about Hinduism. Then we're going to go briefly into Hare Krishna, Zoroastrianism, Jainism, and Sikhism. And we'll just kind of briefly run through those last few because they're all related to Hinduism, and you sort of have to understand Hinduism to understand where they're coming from. And most of them are just sort of offshoots and variations on Hinduism. But I think this is, I hope the folks that couldn't make it tonight get a chance. If they don't come to anything else, I hope they get a chance to watch this, because everything we've studied up to this point is relatively familiar to us. Even Islam, as different as it is relatively familiar to us, number one, because it's in the news. But number two, even their faith system is still somewhat rooted in out of the Bible, and familiar names and even familiar principles and whatnot. Hinduism, we're going to get into tonight. This is a completely different way of looking at life and looking at reality. And please, if anybody here has any personal experience in some of these, feel free to chime in and add to or correct. But this is one of the reasons why we did, the first couple of classes, we sort of went into some of that complex philosophy and talking about the divine predicate and stuff like that, because this now, what we're going to talk about today is going to take us to a completely different place, a completely different mindset. This is the Eastern mindset, Eastern way of looking at things, and explaining the universe. So, we're starting off looking at Hinduism with its origins in North India. Now, Hindus and practitioners and Hindu scholars would tell you it's been around for millions and millions of years, since the dawn of creation, since things first began. That's how long Hinduism has been around. Not to mention, we'll talk about in a few minutes, that they believe in this thing called a yuga, which is a cycle. And there have been 4 of them, where the earth gets to a certain point and then has to be destroyed and then recreated. So we've been through several of these cycles in their religion. And of course Hindu has been around for all of them, so it's been millions and millions of years. But the reality is, about 1500 BC is when it really begins, historically, when it seems to appear on the scene. There's no real founder. There's no one to say, oh, this is the person that founded or came up with Hinduism. There's no unifying philosophy. It just sort of evolved by the mingling of some other religions and influences that were not particularly compatible with one another. So about 1500 BC, there was a group of people called Aryans. We'll go back in a minute. So the Aryans sort of came from this area, we're looking at this is, I think, Turkmenistan and that area. You got Afghanistan going in here, and, a lot of the stands are all in around here. And there was a group of people called the Aryans. Interesting. We're going to find out later, sort of somewhat related to Hitler's master race. And he got his ideas from these people, but in the wrong way. We'll see in a minute. But they were monotheistic. They were a monotheistic people. They had a 1,000-year-long conquest of this area. They moved in from this area around the Caspian Sea, moved into northern India, into Iran. For about 1,000 years, they just slowly, and like a drip, 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 and conquered that area and brought their culture and their religion into the area. And what happened in Iran, we'll find out, is Zoroastrianism came out of that almost as a revolt against the Aryan faith coming in. It still merged with it, but it was a pushback on this Aryan religion. And then in India, it was more of a molding and a melting pot, a merging of religions that resulted in Hinduism. Now, the chief things that we find in Hinduism are what's called the Vedas. Okay? The Vedas is the foundational scripture. There's hundreds of scriptures, hundreds and hundreds of Hindu scriptures. And some of them in later years, and there's different groups, there's different schools of thought in Hinduism, and in later years, some later writings were considered to be added to the Vedas, and others that are purists say, no, the Vedas are the Vedas, and these, that's it. But these are the foundational truths that were revealed to a group of holy men called the Rishis, who wrote these things down for posterity. And this was around that time of the merging of the Aryans and the ancient Indians. And it is a compilation rather than a unitary work. It's not something that was just sat down and written. It was sort of a compilation of works of revelations, if you will. And there's 4 basic Vedas. There's the Rig Veda, which is over 1,000 prayerful hymns. The Yajur Veda, which is a list of mantras and short verses recited by priests. The Sama Veda, which is songs and chants used by priests. And the Atharva Veda, which is a list of magic spells and incantations. The last one has more to do with folk religion. And we'll find this with every one of the religions that we're going to study. There's sort of the official belief systems, and then we find the way that it's actually practiced and the way that it's lived out in people. And so this had more to do with that. It's considered inferior to the other 3, but still among the Vedas, it's still considered divine and inspired, if you will. Each Brahmin priest is required to specialize in one of these 4 Vedas, and they have to memorize the entire Veda. And that's their particular school, if you will, that they have to memorize that Veda that is their specialty, and all the associated commentaries that go with it, and the rituals and everything like that. Now, within the Vedas are a number of gods. As this monotheistic Aryan religion came in to India, they were very polytheistic, and so they sort of merged, and they started, as these writings were coming out, it really developed initially as a polytheistic religion. And just a list of some of the gods that were originally listed in the Vedas. Okay? These first 3 were sort of ancient gods that were brought in from the Aryans, and we're going to talk about them a little later too. if you talk to a Hindu today, Indra is what they consider to be the, the king of God, the supreme God. But even that, in the Vedas, we're going to get into some of the three main gods within Hinduism. But as far as in the Vedas, they will say that Indra is the supreme god, because as time passed, these sort of lost popularity, losing significance, and because they were sort of brought in from another culture. But this is only a somewhat list. And again, I'm going to put this on the website so you can, look at this and maybe look at it. That should be Mitra. Mitra. But there was 33 listed in the Vedas. Okay, now they have 300 million. But it's interesting because they're still, as we said at the beginning, technically they're not polytheistic. It began polytheistic. These were all separate gods. Out of all of these, there were three, which were Vishnu, Rudra. Rudra was sort of known as the capricious one, or the harsh one. Later, they wanted to make him sound a little less harsh, and they gave him the name Shiva, which means auspicious one. But Vishnu, Rudra, later Shiva, and Brahmanaspati. What happened with Brahmanaspati was, this was the god of the spoken word. So, as you were reading the Vedas, that was, this god, I'm not going to keep saying it, was the one that was in charge of that, was present in the speaking of the word. Okay, eventually, it was shortened to just Brahma, and he became essentially the primary god. That, because the speaking of the word was affiliated with existence, and so three primary gods sort of emerged out of it. Brahma, which was called the creator, Vishnu, which was the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. As destroyer, he was not considered the destroyer in an evil way, but he was the one, like I said, when we got to a certain age where the world was too polluted and it needed to be restored, destroyed, so that it could be recreated, that was what Shiva did. Shiva got to the end of the age and said, okay, it's time to wipe everything out and start over again. So he was the destroyer of evil and a recreator. Okay? Today, we have over 330 million gods from the original 33 Vedic gods within Hindus. And most Hindus worship multiple gods. They have two types of gods: devas, which are considered to be good gods, and asuras, which are malicious gods. Now, the interesting thing is this also came from the Aryans coming in, but for some reason, when it went to Iran, that got switched. The asuras were the good gods, and the devas were the bad gods, for whatever reason. They used the exact same terminology, but they were switched. And we talked about henotheism, which is in some areas of Hinduism, they only worship one god. They will have a god that's their god. And there are sort of a monotheistic deities within some forms of Hinduism, and there are other gods that are among that. But the important thing to remember is when they see these different gods, they see these gods as being what they call avatars of Brahman. Brahman, we'll get to that in a minute, Brahman is all that there is. And this came from this gentleman who was not even, there are three main gods here again. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. to get an idea of what their depiction of these gods are.
They all look like nice, friendly people.
Yeah, they look very nice and friendly. Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. And Vishnu, in modern society, so Vishnu's in the beginning, even though Brahma is considered the creator, Vishnu has sort of arisen as of these three, a primary. And when we get into Hare Krishna, they worship Krishna, who is an avatar of Vishnu. Vishnu sort of became a primary god. But each of these, what's that?
They say Christianity is
Yeah, Hinduism is a very part of it because in one sense there's no rules. There are very little rules. There's very little, necessary. You don't have to be, terribly orthodox. It's very loosey-goosey in their ideas. And again, that's the Eastern mind. They don't look at things as do this and do this and do this. They're very all-encompassing, holistic, if you will. That they see both and, as opposed to either or. They see that there is no absolute, that even things that we consider to be true are really irrelevant because there is only one thing that exists in the universe. That's it. There's only one, there is only one thing. And it's this thing called monism. And, when we're looking at the historical figures of Hinduism, we start with this guy, who technically was Italian or Greek. Probably more of a Greek name, 515 to 450, so we're talking, it was around the time, a little before Socrates, maybe around the time of the end of the Old Testament, maybe a little bit before, around the time of Malachi. He lived in Italy. He studied under some, Greek philosophers, Xenophanes, and, I think he might have even known, did I say Aristotle? Socrates. He had an interest in politics, and he'd drawn up laws for the city of Alea, and he employed what he calls his laws of logic to defend this idea of what's called monism. Now, it wasn't called monism until about the mid-1800s. But what this essentially is, and try to follow it. I know this gets out there, but this is why when we were talking. Remember we were talking about equivocal and univocal, the attributes of God, about God being either equivocal, wholly other, right? Which is what the Muslims believe. Islam believes that Allah is so completely different, that He is nothing, He is so unlike us that we can't even create adjectives to describe God because He's so completely unknowable, because He is so completely different, He is of a completely different nature. It's like I said, it's like trying to think up a fourth primary color. It's beyond our mind's capability to even comprehend anything about God. They see God as so wholly other. Well, in monism, they see God as univocal, which is exactly the same. We talked about how we see God. The Bible describes God in an analogical way. Yeah, He's different, but He's like this. We can say that God is righteous. Do we understand the depth of His righteousness? No. There's aspects of God's righteousness that is beyond our comprehension. But we can at least attribute the idea of righteousness to God, holiness, love, all these things these attributes we can assign to God, we'll call the divine predicate. We can assign these things to God, and we know that they are not exact, but they're close. They give us an idea of what we're talking about. In univocal thought, God is exactly like man. And this idea of monism sort of argues this, and again, he considers it a stage of logic. He says there cannot be more than one thing in the universe. There's only one thing. Absolute monism. You know, I mean, we see, there's many of us in this room, but he doesn't necessarily, he just says it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we see many things, there's still only one thing, and that is that which exists. Okay? If there were two or more things, they would have to differ. Okay? For things to differ, they must differ by either being or not being. In other words, the only way that I can differ from you in my substance, in other words, I'm the exact same substance as you, that we are one substance. We may not realize it, but we are really one substance. We are all one with the universe, if you will. We are one, you know, we just may have a different awareness, but we may not be aware of our oneness, but you know, you and I are the exact same substance, not similar substance, not your substance is just as good as mine. No, we are of the same substance. So the only way that you could be different from me is if you didn't exist. Because that would be the only way to be different. Either by being or not being. But since being is that, since we're both here, then we know we must be identical because we both exist. And if we are different because one of us doesn't exist, well then it really doesn't matter because you don't exist anyway. You know, this is sort of the way his mind is going. So he says, no, on the other hand, can they differ by non-being? For non-being is nothing, and to differ by nothing is not to differ at all. Therefore, there cannot be more than one being, but only one single indivisible being, rigid monism. Okay? This philosophy is what sort of fed into the Hindu philosophy as they moved from polytheism to pantheism. Pantheism is the idea that there is only one thing, that God is all and all is God. And that we are God, we just don't realize it yet. You know, that we are a spark, the Atman. The Atman is what the Hindus call the soul. It's like you have a fire going, and part of that fire are all these embers in there, and it pops and you see a spark go flying out. Well, that spark is part of that fire. But now it just appears to be over here, and it thinks it's over here. You know, and it may be sort of over here, but it doesn't matter. It's still part of that fire. You know, and that's how they see it. You know, the problem with this argument is that it does what they call begs the question. It's circular reasoning. You know, when he says, nor on the other hand can they differ by non-being, for non-being is nothing, and to differ by nothing is not to differ at all, it assumes what he's trying to prove. You know, like I said, he says, well, we can only differ by non-being. Because and he's trying to prove that we're the same by saying, well, if we both are, then we must both be the same. So that proves it. And it doesn't prove anything. It's just stating it differently and using the assumption to prove the point. So it's, and again, he assumes this univocal concept of God, that God is not different in any way. As a matter of fact, God is not personal. God is just an existence that we all share. Okay? And again, I know this just sounds, sometimes it just sounds like I'm just rambling on about stuff that makes no sense, and it's very difficult for, you know, Western minds to wrap their brain on it, but it's a totally different way of looking at reality. They don't, yeah, they don't look at reality in the same way that we do. It's you know, they don't see in individuals the fact that I can't read your thoughts, you know, means anything. That I don't know anything about you unless I talk to you, and they say it doesn't matter. We are, and you know, we say things like, you know, in the body of Christ, we're all part of the body of Christ, you know. But we mean it, again, in an analogical way. That, you know, we are similar, but we're different.
We're all different parts.
Right, and we're all different, and we're alike. None of us is better than another. You know, we're all God's creation. You're not, you know, none of us is higher than the other.
Unity of diversity.
Right, but we're not the same. You know, I am not Dan Murphy, and Dan is not Rick Castellano. We're not interchangeable. You know, he can't just show up one day and just say, "Hey, I'm Rick," and just start. You know, we're not. There is a difference between us, and in the Eastern mindset, in the Hindu mindset, that is not the case.
But in reality, though, I mean, if you were to take, you couldn't take, you know, Dan's heart and throw it into you without consequences, and you wouldn't be the same.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, because they look at the physical universe as illusion anyway, so it doesn't matter. You know, the only thing that truly exists is Brahman, which is the spiritualness of the universe. You know, all this stuff that we see, they call Maya. It's illusion. It's not real. It's just our way of interpreting, you know, reality. So,
Wasn't this Gandhi? Gandhi believed this nonsense.
yeah. But tell you what, Gandhi kicked against the pricks on a couple of things that we're going to talk about when it comes to the caste system, because they are very rigid with the caste system, which we'll talk about. So, some other historical figures. Adi Shankara came later in AD 70 AD 20, you know, considered the greatest philosopher of Hinduism, refined pantheism into a philosophy known as Advaita, Vedanta, or monism. He took this monistic philosophy and he sort of worked it into the Hindu, as Hindu was sort of moving toward pantheism, or having all these gods. They didn't have the 330 million gods yet. They basically just had the Vedic gods. But he began to say, look, they're all one. They're all part of one main God, one existence. And he began to incorporate this monism into Hinduism. Another teacher was the Alvar teachers, were the Alvar saints of South India. They were founders of what's called bhakti, or devotional schools of Hinduism. And worshiping God as a supreme person, one or more of the manifestations of God, so like, for example, some will worship Krishna. When they do it, they personalize God. They take Brahman, the existence in the universe, and that Brahman is being expressed in this particular God, like Vishnu. And Vishnu expresses himself in an avatar like Krishna, and they may worship Krishna. And that's their God, and they'll have a little God in their house, and they get down, and they truly believe that Vishnu or Krishna lives inside that little statue, you know, and they worship their God, but they still, in the end, they're still pantheistic.
What does the word Hari mean?
What's
Hare
that?
Krishna.
Hari, it just means like praise. Praise.
Oh, really?
Praise Krishna. Praise Krishna. Yeah. All right. These are just some other important writings, and we're just going to just take a quick glance at them. Just beyond the Vedas, there was called the Brahmanas, which is rituals and mantras. The Upanishads, the Upanishads, some philosophical works, Dharmashastras. Included in the Dharmashastras is something called the Laws of Men, which was almost like a code of Hammurabi. It was a list of do's and don'ts for civic behavior. And in the Laws of Manu is the caste system. Now, the caste system is talked about in the Vedas, but in the Laws of Manu, the caste system is very strongly enforced, and because it's all about moral living and civic behavior. So they look at the caste system as a way of keeping order in society. So it becomes very rigid and very strict in the Laws of Manu. The Brahma Sutras, verses of cryptic descriptions of God, reality, and salvation, other matters. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata. This is important because in these comes what's called the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita has become a number one for the Hare Krishnas. It's basically their Bible. When all it really is a story. It's a poem about a man who was going to war with his brother, and he was having a crisis of conscience about it. He didn't know what to do. He didn't really want to go to war, but he was of the war caste and said, well, it's my duty to go to war, and I have to do this, and I want to know what the outcome is. And so Vishnu appears to him as Krishna and talks to him and starts giving him advice and giving him information about, you know, Hinduism and philosophy and all this kind of stuff. And he ends up going to war and he wins. And so this Bhagavad Gita becomes a very, it's almost like the practical application of Hinduism in a poem. So it sort of carries a lot of weight because they see it sort of played out in this scenario. And so, particularly with the Hare Krishnas, they consider it divine. And then we have the Puranas, history of the universe, the Tantras, occultic kind of stuff, spiritual exercises to accelerate enlightenment, because it really is all about enlightenment. It's not about heaven, it's not about salvation, it's about being enlightened, and as you are enlightened, you sort of move up the scale. The major phases that it went through chronologically, which have sort of become the three threads of Hinduism, are what's called the waves.
Is that what Buddha focused on in the last one?
As far as what?
You know, you always hear about Buddha was seeking enlightenment.
Well, yeah. He didn't necessarily focus on the Tantras, but we're going to get to Buddhism next week. But he was a Hindu that sort of, he didn't like the caste system. And that's why, even though Buddhists are very similar to Hindus, because they reject the caste system, they're not considered Hindus by Hindus.
Right.
Because he said, he was a rich prince, and he said, why am I rich and there are people suffering? How do we alleviate the suffering? And the way to alleviate the suffering was through enlightenment. It's basically what he came into. And Buddha, his name was Siddhartha Gautama. Buddha meant an enlightened one. That's why they talk about many Buddhas. This became a Buddha, Buddha this, Buddha that.
So it was a Hindu prince.
So we have the three ways that really make up the philosophy in Hinduism. What's called the way of works, which that was the first during the time of the Vedas. Okay?
And Pastor Rick, could you do me a favor? Could you go back one slide?
Sorry.
Okay, so who is Manu? Could you explain that?
I'm not sure who Manu is. It's just the name of the book called The Laws of Manu. I don't even know that Manu is a person, but it's a book within the Dharma Shastras. But it became like almost like the Ten Commandments to them, or like the Leviticus. It was the laws of this is how you live your life. This is how you get along with your neighbors. This is how you behave in society, and that kind of stuff. And so it became a very important book. Certain things like the Laws of Manu and the Bhagavad Gita. So among all these other writers, just sort of rose to the surface for a lot of Hindus.
Doesn't yoga come in there somewhere?
Yeah, so
Yoga is
yoga is like a teacher, an enlightened teacher. We're going to talk about yogas.
Okay.
Yogis, actually. So we got the three major ways, the three phases. They came chronologically. Initially was the way of works, which was adherence to the Vedas and the laws of Manu. Ritual legal requirements administered by the professional priesthood. So it was a religious order. It was a time where they said, look, these are the things you're supposed to be doing. adhere to the Vedas, adhere to the laws, adhere to the philosophies. The way of knowledge came later. It was a little more deepical, mystical understanding, almost like a Gnostic thing. They were sort of saying, well, we can understand things better. We don't necessarily need the priesthood to do this. With the way of the works, is you had to go do all this through the priesthood. With the way of knowledge, it was more of a self-awareness and a self-understanding, a recognition of Atman Brahman, which is the joining of the soul with the eternal soul of the universe. Okay? And then the way of devotion, which was the most recent phase that it went through. And all of these are still part of, it's not like the way of the works is gone. They came chronologically, but once they were all in place, they were all just sort of there. But the last phase was this way of devotion, where that we were talking about earlier, but they would attach themselves to one God. And that's why there's an emphasis on the Bhagavad Gita, because Vishnu appears in a very personal way. This later became known as what's called bhakti, or the majority of Hinduism is bhakti Hinduism, a loving attachment, and is at the heart of the three contemporary main schools of modern Hinduism, which is Shaivism, which is basically the worship of Shiva. Okay, Vaishnavism, which is the worship of Vishnu. Okay, a little bit more of a personal understanding of Brahman, and then Shaktiism, which is devotion to Shakti, or the Devi, which is the Divine Mother. And these are like the three schools, if you will, in what's called Bhakti Hinduism, which is the predominant form. And again, this is just how they personalize their faith by making it, by picking a particular deity to make their own. Even in Canaanite days, if you remember, Rachel but when Rachel and Jacob left her home, Laban came chasing after them because Rachel had stole his household idols. They had what was called, what you'll see in the scripture sometimes called familiar idols, family idols. For their family, they would have certain idols that they would worship. These pagan, Canaanites would worship certain gods, and they, different from other families that might worship different other gods, and they would bring these things into their home and say, these are our gods. These are our particular gods. And so that's what you see very much in Hinduism, that they'll have their own little shrine in their home for a particular god. But the key teachings, God, while originally they were polytheistic, in time it became pantheistic. All is God, all is divine, the divine is everything. But, as we said, it's, on an individual basis, it can be practiced very differently. In the Rig Vedas, it says this, they call it Indra, Mitra, Varuna, and Agni. These are different gods in the Vedas. And also the heavenly, beautiful Garutman. The real is one, though sages name it variously. Well, interesting. Remember our friend John Hick we talked about, the pluralist. He rewrote it and said this. They call it Yahweh, Allah, Krishna, Param Atma, and also the Holy Blessed Trinity. The real is one, though the sages name it differently. It's this all-inclusive way of looking at all religions and saying, well, look, it's all just an expression of Brahman, the one thing, monism. There's only one thing in the universe, and we're all just part of that one thing, even though it's expressed differently. So Brahman is the divine totality, the ultimate reality. Atman is the divided soul, meaning that somehow our soul became separated in a way from Brahman, from the oneness that's in the universe. And But we are still part of, in other words, we're just part of God. And we can worship our inner self. God lives within you as you. Okay, Brahman is God, conceptualized in an impersonal, all-pervasive being. Brahman is all there is. That's all there is. It's Brahman. Everything that is not Brahman is Maya, play, or illusion. So, they look at sin, they look at just even our physical bodies, it's all Maya. It's all just an illusion, it's a perception, it's our brain's way of processing reality, but it's not real. We live in ignorance of our own deity.
Step on the nail and tell me that's not real.
Yeah.
Is Christian Science kind of
Christian Science is, we're going to talk about Christian Science in one of the last two classes, is sort of neither Christian nor science. It is Eastern in its conceptualization, but it really, I don't even know why they even call it Christian, because it's not, other than that they believe that Christ was an enlightened one who understood these things, that that on the same idea that what we see and touch, it's a little bit more Gnostic, because anything physical is not real and is actually evil. That only spiritual things are real and good. And that's sort of the basis of Christian Science, whereas this is, because it's pantheistic, it's just saying, it's not even saying that the spirit and physical, because it's saying that there is nothing else. That everything is just illusion. They're not even saying it's evil and good. There is no good and evil, in a sense. There is no good and evil in Hinduism, because there is only Brahman. And everything is just an expression of Brahman.
Where do the cows come in? They worship cows.
Well, they really don't worship cows. It's not that they worship cows, but they have a thing called ahisma, which is do no harm. You should know that one, right? they say don't harm anything. Physically, verbally, emotionally, in any way, you're not supposed to harm anybody or anything. And one of their deities, a female deity, did come in an appearance of a cow one time. So while they don't worship the cow, they venerate the cows in a sense that they protect them. I mean, they use them. They don't eat them, but they use the milk. They depend on the cows for work and plowing and stuff like that. So they hold them in high esteem because they're so important and valuable to them. They don't necessarily worship them. They can't kill anything. They can't even kill a fly.
So,
Is that? Yeah, because it's not worship. It is more veneration. They exalt them, but they don't necessarily believe that they are God. They do believe that one of their gods appeared as a cow one time, so they're like, well, we never know. This could be another appearance of that god.
so there's no McDonald's or Burger Kings in India.
Not that sell beef. They don't sell beef.
Chicken.
Chick-fil-A.
Chicken McNuggets.
Cats.
So a very important part of Hindu key teachings is the caste system. It is inflexible. It is.
With those guys up there in Tibet, they're Buddhists.
That's Buddhist in Tibet.
Yeah, they're kind of that way. Before they build a monastery or something, they have to dig up the ground and take all the worms out of the ground or something like
Well,
that.
yeah, that's a big part of Buddhism.
Right.
That do no harm mindset. So the caste system is a non-negotiable part of Hinduism. If whatever you believe, that's fine, but if it does not include the caste system, it is not Hinduism. And it is just this idea that people fall into categories, that people are at different levels. So we're going to talk about how you sort of get to, you know, these top three are called twice born. Because you had to have been born at least twice in order to get to the next level. The idea is through reincarnation, you work your way up to the top level. You know, and then even beyond this, beyond Brahmin, which is the priestly class, you could actually end up becoming an avatar of a god yourself, and then reach complete enlightenment and be released. But the castes work like this: the Brahmin caste and the priests. And in today's practice, what you might see in a Hindu temple being done by the priests, they're not necessarily Brahmin. They may not even necessarily be twice born. They could even be of the Shudras. They're just workers in the temple. You know, priests today are almost too high up to even be doing menial tasks within the temple. They're more, you know, philosophical and thinking about higher things than that. So,
Rabbi Zacharias says that he came from that class of priestly caste.
yeah, but not in the same way. And, you know, Zechariah, he came from that family. He was,
Right, yeah.
he was out of
He
these.
said his ancestors were of the priestly caste.
Well, because he was out of the house of Aaron. So
Yeah.
that's why.
House of who?
Aaron. Moses'
Talking
brother.
about Rabbi Zacharias.
Oh, Rabbi Zechariah. I thought you meant Zechariah.
Yeah.
No. Oh, Rabbi Zacharias was, he's in the Brahmin caste?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So then you have the Kshatras, I'm sorry, the Kshatriyas, which are the warrior class. What's called the Vaisyas, which are the merchants and owners. And then the last class is the Shudras, which are the workers. They exist only to serve the other castes. And within the Shudras, there are numerous subcastes
Right.
of even lower people. And we look at this. We have, you know, the twice-born group. This, by the way, if you ever see this, this is basically Om when they meditate. When they say Om, that's it's their way of like speaking the name of Brahman. You know, it is the closest way that they can speak the name of Brahman. And that just represents the pronunciation of Om. So you've got the priests, you've got the Kshatriyas, the Vaisyas, the Shudras, and then even below that are the untouchables, or what's called the Dalits, and other class, which are, you can see the jobs that they would have would be street sweepers, latrine cleaners, things like that.
That's why I started out in the army.
As a Dalit.
As an untouchable.
An untouchable.
Cleaning latrines.
And then there are some that even if their shadow were to cross your path, you could be made unclean by their shadow. You know, the idea behind all of this is that all souls will in time merge with Brahman, following multiple, even thousands of reincarnations. Okay, now this is not found in the Vedas. This just sort of evolved in time, this idea of the caste system is found in the Vedas, but they sort of incorporated this idea of reincarnation into the caste system as a way, what's called samsara, or the wandering, or sometimes they call it the wheel. Okay, that people are on. They just keep going around and around and around, reincarnated, back in, hoping to eliminate the bad karma from their life and be able to move up on the scale of the caste system. So they can eventually
Didn't the devil tell Eve
What's
that you
that?
shall be like God and she won't die? You got two of the lies right there.
Yeah. The idea, though, at the end is, it's not even, the problem with that is that when you're like God, because they say you already are God. So in a sense, you already are like God because you are God. You are essentially the same substance as God. But what will happen to you in the end, if you reach absolute enlightenment, you will be like a drop of water that lands in the ocean and become one with the oceans. If you drop a drop of water into the ocean, can you tell where the drop begins and the ocean ends? No. It just becomes indistinguishable from the ocean.
So you lose your personality.
Yeah, you lose your individuality. Essentially, you lose your existence.
Right.
It's essentially annihilationism.
Wow.
It's not living in a bliss. I mean, they call it bliss. They call it.
It's karma, isn't it? Karma
Well, no,
stuff?
karma is the stuff that is the good stuff and the bad stuff. Bad karma, good karma. You know, things that you do that are right or wrong, or not being faithful adherence to the Vedas and to the priests. You know, and if you're able to eliminate all the bad karma, you can reach a level of enlightenment and attain what's called moksha. Which amounts to extinction of the individual personality. There's really no more you, okay? And again, we talked about that these cycles are actually in eras, 4 eras known as these yugas. That the earth was created, got to a point where it was so polluted, you know, with karma that they had to destroy it and then restart it again. I'm trying to think of the Hindu version of heaven. I have it.
Shambhala, is it?
No, you reach nirvana.
Here,
Nirvana.
Yeah, it's
You know,
right
that, do I have it there? I thought I had it or something. Yeah, nirvana. You know, and that's the end of all, and that's the water dropping into the ocean, you're gone, and that's nirvana. They call it bliss, but it's I guess, in their sense, bliss is ignorance. Because now you have no knowledge of anything. You have no knowledge of your own being. You can't distinguish yourself from...
Don't they strive to get to this nirvana
Yeah.
state? That's their big deal.
Yeah. Because they look at, in the United States, we look at but Americans, Westerners, like Shirley MacLaine and others, look at reincarnation as a great thing. I get to come back, and it's funny. They never come. Nobody ever used to be a shoe salesman.
Yeah.
Everybody was always a general, or they were Napoleon or something.
Yeah, come back as a cockroach.
They were George Washington. Nobody was ever a street sweeper. But they look at it like, oh, it's a great thing. I get to come back as another person, and
Can't they come back as a bug? I think it was something like
yeah,
I
if
heard
you were
that.
bad enough, you could come back as an insect
Yeah,
several
I know.
times. You can come back as a cockroach 100 times because you got so much bad karma. And the weird thing is you have no conscience of the karma. You have no conscience of what you did that was in the previous life. You just have to try to get it right this time. And work your way up the scale by cleaning yourself of the karma and just having an
How can a
understanding.
cockroach get it right?
Is that?
How can a cockroach, this is weird stuff.
Yeah, it is. Well, I guess maybe the way they look at it is a cockroach at least can't do any wrong because he doesn't know any better, so he can only move up, right?
Shirley MacLaine is looking forward to coming back. She must think she has a lot of good karma.
Yeah. How do you know when you're going to come back in?
Yeah.
So, they believe in divine beings, exist in unseen worlds, and temple worship and rituals and sacrament. And that's these avatars, or these manifestations, multiple manifestations of higher gods that are manifestations of Brahman. Okay? They just believe that's the Brahman, because Brahman is impersonal. So in order for us to really even begin to connect with it, that there has to be some personality to it, and that's why we have these avatars and these other gods, so we can have communion with these divas and gods.
Do Hindus believe in evolution?
I don't know.
Is their religion is evolving?
Yeah,
I mean.
and it does, and they keep adding gods,
Yeah.
and they keep becoming more and more encompassing. They believe that an enlightened master or a sadguru is essentially essential to know the transcendent absolute. You need to have a guru or a yogi to help guide you into this transcendence, into understanding Brahman and the absolute.
Who are the Maharishis? They always hear that word, Maharishi.
It's just, these are gurus,
Gurus.
yogis, you know, these are just...
Is he a priest?
enlightened-
Is he like a priest? Or?
Yeah, well, even more than that, they're more like philosophers. They're in the priestly class, they're going to be Brahmins, but they're even more than that. They're more enlightened ones that are like philosophers, you know.
Back in the 60s, everybody got into that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll talk about that in a little, because that sort of sparked the Hare Krishna movement. They believe that all life is sacred, to be loved, to be revered, and therefore they practice what's called ahimsa. Ahimsa is the non-injury philosophy. They're not allowed to hurt anything, kill anything, not even a bug, nothing. Not even a microscopic organism in thought or word or deed. They have to be completely pure, again, you know, toward all things. And then lastly, they believe that no religion teaches the only way to salvation above all others, but that all are genuine path and are facets of God's light and deserve tolerance and understanding. So it's a very all-encompassing religion that, you know, is very difficult for us to really wrap our brain around, because it's very impersonal, and the concept of God is so foreign to our concept of God. You know, like I said, the Muslims see God as equivocal. He's so completely different. There is no commonality between God and us. They look at just the opposite. That we're not only like God, we are God. That we're all part of Brahman, and we just need to find our way back into, it's almost like, you know, water in the world. You know, even the Bible talks about all the water basically has been everywhere. You know, the water and the rivers and everything evaporates, goes up in the sky, comes down as rain, lands in the ocean, or lands in the rivers, goes back into the ocean, comes up. You know, they sort of look at everything. Brahman is like the water.
Was it Solomon that said that? Described the water cycle? I think it was Solomon.
But they look at Brahman as that, you know, like it's all water, it's all one, and you know, maybe it's over here right now, maybe over here, but eventually it's all going to go back.
So Brahman is nirvana.
Brahman is the one
It's
thing
even
that
higher than
exists.
Nirvana.
Nirvana, yeah, in a way, Nirvana is when we all become part of Brahman. When you personally become part of Brahman, return back to the ocean, if you will, as part of Brahman, and become one with Brahman, that's what Nirvana is. You know, so it's, in a sense, it's like their heaven, it's their ultimate enlightenment. So it's very complicated, it's very, you know, difficult to wrap your brain around. Now, one of the offshoots is something that we've probably heard about, the Hare Krishnas, which they don't call themselves Hare Krishna. Only we call them Hare Krishna. They call themselves the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, or ISKCON. It is a legitimate form of Vaishnavite, when we talk about the different forms, different schools in Vaishnavism, the worship of Vishnu. It's a form of that. In the 16th century, a man named Caetana, a teacher, proclaimed that Krishna was the highest godhead. They put him, Krishna, at the very top of the, you know, of all the representations of Brahman. And that Krishna was the 9th avatar of Vishnu. Vishnu is, again, they put Vishnu right at the top. He was the middle god there of those 3 gods we showed. And that Vishnu made appearances on earth, and the 9th avatar, the 9th appearance was Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. And that's why the Bhagavad Gita is like their holy book. because it talks about Vishnu and Krishna. Very popular in the 1960s. 5 essential teachings in Hare Krishna is Krishna is the supreme form of personal God. They're essentially monotheistic. I mean, they consider themselves Hindus, but they're so strictly dedicated to Krishna that they're monotheistic. Salvation is obtained by continually chanting Hare Krishna, or praise Krishna, 1,000 times a day. That's why you see them doing it. Just Hare Krishna, and the singing, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna.
I used to see them all over the place back in the 60s.
Yeah, you see particularly in the
Airports and-
airports, particularly in the airports.
Public, everywhere.
The Bhagavad Gita is their inspired scripture. Life of pure devotion to Krishna, abstaining from meat, caffeine, sweets, and sexual pleasure, and the distribution of their literature. That's what they used to do in the airports. handing out
Very
pamphlets.
evangelistic, very,
There they are. You find them dancing a lot, or in meditation. And that's basically what you see here, where they wear the plain robes like that, and very often shave their heads. Yeah, they're not around as much as they used to be, but there's still some around. But they were real big in the. Matter of fact, my brother-in-law tried it for a while, but he was just too ornery. They kicked him out. He's just kind of an ornery cuss, and they said, you don't fit. You need to go. They need people who are peaceful and calm. And he was very argumentative, and they didn't like that. So, but yeah, they're not as popular as they once were. Okay, so then we have Zoroastrianism.
Yeah, I
Okay.
never had any
There about 189,000 worldwide. Again, the Aryans, 1500 BC, came in. Some went to Iran. Started out as 2 kinds of spiritual gods. Again, the same 2 types of gods, Ahoras and Devas. Only this time, the Ahoras are good and the Devas are evil. And
Is that why they call them singers, divas?
yeah, because the Devas were like female, the female gods.
Really?
So yeah, so that's why they have that.
So they're evil singers. Huh?
Yeah. Remnants of the roots of monotheism. This Dev once meant a single god. And this was an interesting thing that I found out, sort of a progression. This main god that was part of the original monotheism that came over through the Arianism was a main god called Dios Pitar, okay, or Father God. Okay. Dios Pitar, later in Greek, was transliterated to Zeus Pater, or Zeus. And Zeus Pater later translated into Latin as Jupiter, or Jupiter. Because if you ever studied, ancient Greek and Roman mythology, their main god, the Greeks' main god is Zeus, and the Romans' main god is Jupiter, and all the Roman gods and Greek gods have counterparts, so that,
didn't they think Paul was Jupiter in one of those Galatian towns?
when they,
So you're saying the people that were up there around the Black Sea
Mhm.
that came down to India and started that whole Hindu religion, is the Greek and the Roman offshoot of the Hindu religion, or does it have its roots in
No, I think they probably went in both, if we go all the way back,
They went both
they
ways.
probably went in both directions, because they're not far from Greece. I mean, there's Turkey right there. I mean, this is Greece essentially right here.
Right, so they went both ways.
So I think they probably went this way too, and here's the thing. It started as a monotheistic religion, probably originating from this area, which is
Iran,
in Iraq,
right,
which is where society began,
right,
which
Tower of Babel area,
where they call what they call the Sumerian race,
right,
right? What they call the Sumerian race that lived, even archaeologists and anthropologists study, that lived 4,000 to 5,000 years ago.
wasn't Abraham in Samaria?
Not Abraham. Because Abraham, well, I guess he was a later Sumerian.
He was right down there.
He was in here and then moved down into here.
Right, but he started out down in Ur, which is right about,
Right, it's right
no
in,
further south,
in.
right where the rivers fork
this is
there.
Kuwait
Yeah,
here.
right there is Ur.
Oh, is it? Where the
Yeah.
rivers meet? Yeah.
That's where they figured the Tower of Babel was too.
Yeah, 'cause that was
Yeah.
part of Iraq and battle. But, you know, what the archaeologists call the Sumerians, we call it the sons of Adam. You know, I mean, all the children that Adam and Eve had and their children, and, you know, you go through the lineage in the book of Genesis, that's the Sumerians. You know, it said when Cain went out, he built a city. Well, these cities were called little kingdoms. And the Sumer, in their language, in the language of that day, a Sumer was a kingdom or a city. And they were called the Sumerians because they were building cities. And that's what they call this the birthplace of civilization. It's
Right.
interesting that they don't even listen to themselves. They know the birthplace of civilizations
Well, you mean
somewhere around the
archaeologists?
Tigris and Euphrates, which is exactly where the Bible says that civilization
Yeah, the
began.
archaeologists run around carrying a Bible under their arm, but they don't believe it.
Yeah,
Where did you say Turkey was in contrast to that?
that's true.
Because if that's Turkey, because that's also where Noah's Ark landed.
Yeah, in the mountains of
Mountains of
Ararat.
Ararat.
So, because they were all in here. This was where, you know, the Garden of Eden was somewhere in this, and it's interesting when you look at the map of the world, this area here was like the center,
The Garden of
the
Eden.
very center. This is, you know, the Garden of Eden may have been where Israel is,
The
but
Garden of Eden was totally destroyed
yeah, it's
in
gone.
the flood.
That's true, wiped out
the
the coast.
topography of the world doesn't even look anything like
Yeah,
it
that's
did.
why the Tigris and
Before the flood,
Euphrates
all the land was in
different.
one place.
look, and
So-
the third river that
Garden
they
of
talk
Eden could have
about.
been in Alaska for all we know.
Yeah.
But that's where Noah landed, and that's where it all started over again.
Yeah, right. So, getting back to Zoroastrianism. Okay.
Garden of Eden is under 1,087.
The Magi were part of this. It was in the 6th century BC. It was the rise of the Magi, a priestly aristocracy. And put my glasses on here. Around 628, 551 BC, a man named Zoroaster came along. He had visions from Ahura Mazda, the wise lord. He had over 6 visions over 8 years. And his teaching, basically, he was teaching monotheism, which was deadly to the priesthood because the priesthood thrived on the polytheistic mindset. And it cut at the livelihood of the priesthood. And he ended up writing a collection of scriptures called the Avesta, and it was a return to monotheism where the Ahura Mazda was the wise lord, and there were the Devas, the evil spirits, but they were not divine. They were like angels. They were evil creations.
That almost sounds like Muhammad.
Yeah, and so, you know, again, it's the playbook, Satan's playbook. It's
Same
always the
as
same.
Everett, that's what I was going to say, it didn't change.
You know, eventually evolved into dualism. You know, deeds are accumulated in life. You either support truth and your reward, you support a lie and its punishment. It sort of became this idea of like, you know, the old, you know, devil on your shoulder. Which one are you going to listen to? You listen to the good one, you listen to the bad one. You listen to the good one and the bad one. And that's really where Star Wars gets their idea of
The Force.
the Force, you know, the dark side
I was
and the
reading
good
an
side.
article about George Lucas today and how he considers all religions. He's a kind of a Zor, one of these Hindu or Buddhist, or he's got those kind of
Lucas?
tendencies. George Lucas, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he's into Eastern religion, and that's probably where he got all of this.
Yeah,
You say Lucas is into Eastern stuff, or?
yeah,
George Lucas.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, and then so the Muslims moved in and sort of tossed them out of Iran and really pushed them into India. And a lot of them were sort of scattered throughout that area, and they were called the Parsis or the Persians. That's what sort of created the Persian race. Eventually, it moved into polytheistic culture. They have a pluralistic view of faiths, so they have other faiths that, they're okay. You can believe whatever you want to believe. They became very culturally tied in. Religion is tied to ethnicity, so whatever you were born into, just worship that. You'll be fine. Just stick with whatever religion you were born into, your culture, and try not to move outside of your thing. And that's one thing, too, I forgot to mention about the caste. You're not allowed, you cannot move, you are limited by your caste. You don't try to move out of your caste or try to pretend that you're a part of another caste, and you cannot marry outside of your caste. That would be a huge, faux pas. And again, in modern society, it's not as strictly as adhered to, but more so than you might think.
How do the Dawits get to be such the lowest level?
Because they're untouchable. And here's the, part of the problem with Hinduism, we'll back up to Hinduism for a moment. Part of the problem with Hinduism is the philosophy that if I see this person, this Dalit, who is lying in the filth, and they're lying in the dirt, and and sometimes they're even abused and kicked and beaten and treated like garbage, and, which they shouldn't do that because they're not supposed to do any harm. They're not supposed to be hurting anything. But it's still not, if you try to alleviate their pain, you are robbing them of paying for their karma. If you try to help them, if you try to give money to them and alleviate their suffering, you are keeping them from paying off their karma, and thereby you are condemning them to repeat this life again. That's why poverty is so rampant.
Wow, what an evil.
That it would be wrong to help these people, because all you're doing is you're alleviating their suffering so that they don't, they're not paying off the bad karma, and they're going to have to come back and live that life again. So in their mind, they're thinking, I'm doing this person a favor by not helping them out.
Don't do any harm, but don't do any good either.
Yeah, right.
Just the opposite of Christianity and Judaism,
Yeah.
really.
So anyway, one of my favorite things about Zoroastrianism is they believe that the world will end in a molten metal flood that will feel like a bath of warm milk to the righteous. It's just an interesting word picture.
Wow.
All right. Last two things real quick.
I wouldn't know what that's like.
Okay, this Zoroastrianism sort of symbol and some of the, just a nutshell thing. I thought this was interesting because this symbol,
That looks Persian.
to me it looks Nazi.
Well, yeah.
The wings, not so much the guy here, but this thing here reminds me of Nazi Germany.
Yes.
The
Yes,
wingspan
that
and
is-
everything, which is interesting because when we get into Jainism, look at that.
Yeah.
The swastika is it was actually part of Arianism.
Right.
But, so Jainism, was, essentially came out of Hinduism. This one guy, Mahavira, was disillusioned with his wealthy life and luxury, forsook everything, a life of asceticism, no clothes, no shelter, avoids harming any living thing. Again, that ahimsa. After 13 years, he achieved enlightenment and understood the universe and became known as Jina, or conqueror, and those who follow him are called the Jainists. He believes in many distinct souls, differs from monistic pantheism. They believe in the individuality of the soul. And left alone, your soul should float like a balloon to the top of a human-shaped universe to exist forever. Souls have been contaminated and weighed down by karma, so they still believe in karma. The greatest achievement would be to starve to death under a tree. Asceticism and suffering is exalted for them. They're Hindu, but their gods are for personal piety and not enlightenment. And I'm going to sit through some of this stuff. Okay.
You were going to tell us how Nazism was hooked in with Aryanism.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I think he just stole some of the imagery.
He sent a bunch of his Nazis out, archaeologists and all
Yeah,
that.
I know he was very obsessed with archaeology and things like
Yeah.
that, and history, so I think he stole some of the imagery. 5 vows in Jainism is Hisma, which is, again, no harm, the living thing. Truth-telling, they're so afraid of telling a lie even by accident, by getting something wrong, that they end every sentence with maybe or somehow. Just to make sure that they are not too affirmative about something just in case they're wrong. Abstaining from theft to the point where they won't even accept anything that isn't given. They don't want to buy anything because there's a chance that maybe they didn't pay enough for it, and thereby they stole it. You know, so they don't own property. Conquering sexual desire, detachment. They renounce everything: family, self, body, even name. It's a very ascetic religion. And this is just some of the symbols of it. I think it's just, this is the shape of the universe, and the point is to ascend up to the top of it. The abode of the liberated soul. Again, this was meant to be, again, you see, heaven, human, animal, hell, these are the 4 states of the soul, and this was meant to be sort of a word that meant unity and peace and, that kind of thing. Again, I think Hitler stole some of the imagery from these religions. Last thing is Sikhism. You've seen these guys, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's a Sikh. They're not Muslim. They're actually a combination of Islam and Hinduism. About 19 million of them worldwide. It was an attempt to create a harmony between Islam and Hinduism, because in the 16th century, India was ruled by Muslim emperors, and they were constantly at war. They were constantly going at it, having a very volatile relationship, and they were, as culture would be, as culture sort of merged, some people, there's intermarrying, there's an attempt for appeasement, people sort of start merging their religions, and that's basically where Sikhism came from. The true God transcends established religious distinctions, the idea of there's no Muslims, there's no Hindus, there's no, our religion is true unto itself, but, we're all part of this one thing. There are not different religions. They dressed in a combination of both Muslim and Hindu garb. When this guy died, when Nanak died, who was basically the founder of it, his body was left out for a day and supposedly it vanished. And they believe in karma, they believe in reincarnation, moksha, all that, Hindu stuff. But they still are based, but they're also somewhat monotheistic because they borrowed stuff from Islam. They believe in 10 successions of gurus embodied by God to teach the divine. Their holy book, the Adi Granth, is the final guru. They actually became warriors. That's why you see them, because they were persecuted by Muslims so much that they trained to do battle and to protect their own existence. And when the English came into India, they found these guys that were like these trained warriors, and the British recruited them. They were defeated by the British, but then the British recruited them to become the local police, the local force. That's why you see them often with these swords, because they're known to be like warriors.
There, when I was in Milwaukee a few years back, 2013, somebody went in and shot up one of their churches, killed a bunch of them.
Yeah, sometimes people, because they wear the turbans, I don't even think they call it a
I wonder
turban.
if it was a Muslim Sikhism thing.
Yeah, well, they were attacked by Muslims.
I don't know.
People thought they were Muslim, because people can look at this guy and think that he's a Muslim.
Right.
They do have a different look. I mean, usually they let their beards grow very long. Their hair, they don't cut their hair. They let their hair grow very, very, very long, and then they start tying it up in a great big knot. And that's why they wear these turbans, to keep all their hair inside their head.
When I used to work at a prison, our supervisor was a Shek, or whatever they call him.
Sikh, yeah.
Basically, I thought he was a nice guy, but he could be problematic. But we had a doctor working who was a Hindu, and he was terrified of the boss, the Sikh.
Yeah.
He actually used to believe he had a knife in his hair under the turban.
Yeah, well, because that's what they were
They were
doing.
like
They
a
would hide the
warrior.
knives in there. They were warriors.
You made me
They were-
think of that when you mentioned that.
They fought against the Muslims fiercely.
Yeah, well, the Hindu was terrified of the Sikh.
Yeah, because the Hindus, again, they're very peaceful, and they didn't really fight against the Muslims, the Muslim emperors that came in India. You know, they're not fighters. They just, you know, because of the Hindu Ahisma, they don't want to do any harm, they don't want to hurt anybody, they're very strict pacifists. So they were just basically being defeated and being kicked around, and the Sikhs were trying to find a middle ground, and eventually, because of the resistance of the Muslims, they became warriors. They became, you know, fierce and feared fighters.
I used to talk to him about Jesus, and he would talk to me about meditating and all that stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's sort of an
Yeah.
intermarrying of Islam and Hinduism. So that's the. Any questions?
Pastor, those people that the tribe of Ashira, they don't like to kill people, right?
Who are you talking about?
Ashira.
Who's a Shia? Ahisma. Ahisma is just a principle.
They don't want to kill people, right?
It's not a tribe. You're talking about Ahisma?
Yeah.
It's not a tribe. It's a principle.
Mhm.
Ahisma is the principle of not doing any harm to anybody, no injury to anybody. So they practice it. They practice Ahisma. That they, you know, they will not. The Jainists are extreme pacifists. That's Ahisma is one of the foundations of their faith.
Recently, there was something in the news about a bunch of Hindus went into a town over in India and killed a bunch of people, which doesn't sound like that peaceful,
Yeah, it's, you know, again,
unless they were one of their branches or.
it's like any religion, it's practiced in various degrees of orthodoxy. You know, those that follow it very strictly are gonna look to that, and if they're seeking enlightenment. But just like in Judaism, you know, you could say there are sort of reformed Hindus. You know, I sort of believe that stuff, but whatever. You know, they don't necessarily adhere to it or try to follow it. They don't have any real dedication to trying to keep to it.
You can believe they're warriors. That guy has a real serious look on his face.
This guy here.
Yeah.
You know, there was another one. There was another picture I didn't put up. This one guy looked, he had the sword in his hand like this. It was like,
Yeah.
You think they really have a knife in there under that
They
turban?
probably used to keep knives in there, yeah. They probably did.
You know, wrap it up in a hair and.
Because they had to defend themselves
Keep
against
your
the
emotions
Muslims.
there.
Because remember, Muslims are absolutely violent. You know, in that day, that was what they did, is they evangelized through conquest. So that was their, and these guys had to defend themselves.
You know, I don't know what religion, but when we were kids growing up, when I was a kid, there was this kid who came to school with a wool hat, and it was his religion that he could not remove the wool hat. Well, somebody else pulled the hat off in the hallway as a joke. Well, he came back the next day with a knife and killed the kid.
Oh, wow.
So, but that was
I wonder if it was.
I was like, what?
You said a wool hat, I was
religion
thinking, I
is
was
this?
thinking
And we thought like, you know.
Hasidic Jews, but I don't think a Hasidic Jew would have come back with a knife to kill the guy.
He
No.
killed, and
It sounds a little bit more like a
He
Sikh.
was a boy, he was a boy.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? A ninth grade kid killed another ninth grade kid.
Yeah, the boys don't wear this. The boys, their hair gets, because their hair's not quite long enough, it almost looks like, you know, what you see today, the man bun.
Yeah.
They get that little man bun going on, but it's sort of just wrapped up in a little cloth. So it looks like they just sort of have this little thing on their head, like a cloth, and maybe that's what it was. It was like, he said it was a little hat.
Man bun.
Because what hair he has, if they pull it off, their hair will be down here. These guys, their hair will be down to here, but the kids.
Sounds like it was Amish.
What's that?
Sounds like it was an Amish kid.
No,
Those Amish kids are terrible, aren't
Yeah.
they? They're always killing
We never
someone.
saw the guy without his turban. He always had a turban on.
Yeah, they have to do the turn.
Picking on the Amish.
All right, any last questions?
As a side note, Chuck Missler, if anybody ever listens to him, has a series on our reality and the dimensions of reality. And he details out in physics why what we see right now is really just a digital hologram. That this present reality is not really real, so to speak. And he actually details out the physics of it.
She's right. I heard him
Yeah.
do that. He believes this is all an image.
He, really?
Yep. Go on YouTube and Google Missler, and then
Right.
do dimensions and reality. And he details out the physics of, the smallest particle and how you can mince it out to the finest. And that there are really 10 dimensions of reality, and what we see right now is just a hologram.
Yeah, he brings it up in every study.
Yeah.
He always talks about we're living in a digital image or something.
Yeah.
Well, and who knows what he
Digital
means. I mean, he
hologram.
may just be talking about the idea of how light works and things like that.
Yeah.
It seems like
He said
a,
holograms and,
you know,
yeah.
Yeah, that sounds
I hate to
a
say it,
little-
but Chuck Missler, it sounds like a waste of time. I mean, Chuck Missler's a pretty good teacher. This just sounds like getting, overworking a principle that probably doesn't need to be, because it's not necessarily a biblical principle. It may be scientifically true.
Well, I think he's
Yeah.
trying to describe when you read about heaven and how it's a cube and how it can all, the different dimensions of heaven, he's trying to describe how it can be possible
Yeah.
in our
Well,
human
there were
mind.
certainly we.
Yeah, he would
In
say
this
that
room- In
Jesus,
this room, we could have who knows how many spiritual beings.
Right.
yeah, he would say Jesus went into another dimension, which is heaven, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I believe that. I believe heaven is in another dimension.
Well, no, like,
We're in a time-space
he could be right here. Heaven could be right here.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Well,
this
Like the
is,
railroad
yeah,
train,
we're-
the train
we're
going
not-
through the
again, to me, it's one of those things, I don't want to waste my time.
Right.
I don't even necessarily want to waste my time,
Yeah.
because it's not in the Bible, so I'll waste my time talking about what's.
Well, it makes sense because Jesus just appeared in the upper room.
Yeah, you could pass through walls, so obviously there was something on a molecular level going on.
Yeah, we
That he
live
was
in a-
not,
It's a waste of time, but it's interesting.
Two-dimensional Time, space,
Rick?
matter,
right.
It's a waste of time, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting, but it's,
Well, if
I
God
wouldn't necessarily-
created the universe, which is time, space, and matter, he must exist outside of it.
yeah.
Because how could he exist inside if he's pre-existent?
Yeah.
So.
No, it's innocent, it's
he
something
might
that
be
I
right.
would-
This
I would
might be
talk
right.
about
What
in a
it is,
conversation.
No,
I don't think I'd teach it,
no.
but that's okay. I mean, Chuck Missler's a great guy. I don't have any problem with Chuck Missler. I'm just surprised that he would take the time to
Nancy.
teach that. Yeah. Anyway. Hinduism, interesting stuff, huh? Just a mind-blowing.
Fascinating,
Just a different way of looking at it. And that's why, you talk, if a Hindu comes over here, you try to talk to them about Christianity, you try to talk to them about truth, they see it differently. They won't argue with you. They'll be like, okay, sure. You're right now, mate. We're all right.
I worked with a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Sikh, all, these are all
Sounds like
doctors.
one of those jokes.
They all
Buddhist,
walk
a Hindu, and a...
behind.
And a Sikh, and 3 of them at one time. There was 6 of them, 3 of them were these different religions.
There, the next guy shut you down.
All right, let's pray. Father, thank you again for helping us to understand just some of these different concepts of God and how the enemy has so poisoned and polluted the minds of people to drive them from understanding who you are, and even by corrupting the concept of truth and reality. Father, we pray for the millions and millions, hundreds of millions of Hindus in the world, that they would hear your voice somehow, that you would speak to them, and pray for them to come to know you, discovering truth giving up what their mind already knows is foolishness. So Father, again, we just thank you for the time you've given us and ask now you would bless us as we go. In Jesus' name, amen.